Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. We bring you subject matter experts from around the world and share the latest and greatest evidence-based practices and interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. We do so by painting an accurate picture of that journey from the perspective of the justice-involved individual. This podcast avoids stereotypes and biases in favor of the lived experiences of those we can best learn from. Now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
G'day, mates, and welcome to episode 183 of The Criminologist Podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. This week, I am pleased to be bringing you my post-Australia visit episode, hence my colloquial Aussie greeting to open the podcast. I have had my brekkie, and I am ready to debrief and share with you some of the amazing things I experienced, and more importantly, mention just a few of the amazing connections I made along the way through this latest chapter of my journey. To start, for those of you who were not yet in the know, I was asked to deliver the keynote address to open the Probation and Community Corrections Officers Association Conference in Sydney, Australia. They provide an Australia-wide opportunity for professionals responsible for the management of clients to discuss developments and changes within the field of practice. If you want to check out more about PACCOA, I will leave a link in this episode description to check out their homepage. I encourage you to do so, particularly for my Australian listeners who may not yet be members. After a long flight across the Pacific, my wife and I landed in Sydney and gave ourselves some time to see the beautiful country for ourselves firsthand before the conference kicked off. Our first adventure was a trek to Bondi Beach, which was as beautiful as you can imagine. We explored Circular Quay, an area of Sydney, which of course includes the iconic Sydney Opera House. We got down to check out The Rocks. The Rocks is an area of Sydney which was established shortly after the colony was formed in 1788. It was fascinating to check out that rich historical area of New South Wales. But beyond the sights and sounds of Sydney, I, of course, had the opportunity to connect with like-minded individuals and grow my social capital. Even before the conference kicked off, I got to meet some amazing correctional professionals from New South Wales. Juliana, Marissa, Dom, and Mallory, thank you so much for welcoming me and, of course, getting me turned on to ordering a flat white coffee. The coffee situation was a bit of a struggle at first, but thank you all for setting me straight on the flat white. It was so nice to meet some of my doppelgangers in the Southern Hemisphere. Always a treat to meet like-minded professionals. And speaking of meeting individuals, I had the honor of meeting my number one fan in all of Australia, talking, of course, about the incomparable Tammy Lewis. Tammy is a fan of the podcast who currently works as a training officer with the Northern Territory Corrections Department in beautiful Darwin, Australia. Go NT! Tammy reached out to me a while back to gauge my interest in traveling to Australia to deliver the keynote address for their National Probation Conference, and of course, I was delighted to accept. Tammy, you have my eternal gratitude. It was so nice to finally meet you in person. I also had the honor of meeting Daniel Lang. Daniel is the president of PACCOA, Him and his entire team did such a great job of hosting this year's conference in Sydney. Thank you, Daniel, to you and all of your colleagues for adopting me for a few days and truly making me feel at home. And then, of course, I had the honor of opening the PACCOA Conference with my keynote. In short, I talked about the parallel process of human change and development. I did so by first introducing the overarching concepts of the process of desistance from crime. Of course, I'm referring to developing one's human capital, growing one's social capital, and evolving one's identity. We know that this cocktail of change results in desistance from crime, of course, but I illustrated the universality of these themes by juxtaposing them with my own professional trajectory. That is, by sharing my 35-year journey in corrections, I showed how the development of my human capital, social capital, and identity also altered my professional behaviors. From a cost of supervision collection machine with the Florida Department of Corrections, to a gang specialist and investigator, to an evidence-based practices champion. Such a great time delivering that message. I would be remiss if I did not mention some of the other great speakers at this 2-day event that I get a chance to connect with. Beginning, of course, with Liz Moore. Liz is a case manager with the Tasmania Department of Justice. Liz acted as our master of ceremonies from time to time to keep us all on track. Liz, I so appreciate your energy and sense of humor. You had me laughing the entire time you took the stage. And of course, Liz did a great job presenting on her topic, Lessons from the Front Line, What 30 Years in Corrections Has Taught Me. Thank you, Liz, for being such a great host. A shout out to Dr. Vlad Lukov. Vlad is a learning and development officer with the Community and Workplace Training Unit in New South Wales. Vlad, it was so great to connect with you, and of course, let's listen to your session on the innovations and challenges of delivering community corrections officer training in an exclusive online context. I loved talking to you afterwards about our shared experiences delivering in an online context vis-a-vis a brick and mortar method of delivering learning. I sincerely hope we keep in touch, my friend. Dr. Suzanne Reich, so grateful that our paths crossed. Suzanne presented on conversations with employers, crafting a narrative that showcases employability appeal. Suzanne, I can't wait to have you on the Criminologist podcast to talk about desistance from crime and what we can do to address those barriers to reintegration. Victoria Nagy and Catherine Ibot from Community Corrections in Tasmania. I absolutely loved the energy and enthusiasm you brought. We need more of that positivity in our field. And of course, I finally got to connect a face to the name Dr. Caleb Lloyd. I have followed the work of Caleb for years. Caleb and I are both disciples, if you will, of Dr. Ralph Sarin. A pleasure to see Caleb and his presentation with his colleagues Nadine Robinson, Rachel Fullman, Colin Christie, and Cassie Kellett, speaking as to developing and delivering an evidence-based next-generation foundational training program for community corrections officers. This is actually a reminder to myself that I need to follow up with you folks to pick your brains. The content you presented was brilliant, and I need to learn more and grow just a bit more with all of you. And to everybody else who presented and took a moment to chat with me, thank you all so much for growing my social capital, augmenting my human capital with your knowledge and skills, and of course, evolving my identity. And I would be so remiss if I did not mention the amazing Kath Koschel. Kath, founder of the Kindness Factory, which is a global nonprofit organization and movement that inspires ordinary people to do extraordinary things, was just an incredible individual and amazing speaker. Kath is a former professional cricketer and Ironman competitor who has defied all medical prognosis by teaching herself to walk on not one, not two, but 3 separate occasions. Despite facing other serious personal, mental, and physical setbacks, her resilience has allowed her to not only overcome these challenges, but also see the good in the world when most others could not. Hope we can keep in touch, Kath. I'm going to leave a link for the Kindness Factory as well as your book in the episode description of this podcast. I encourage all my listeners to go out and go down that rabbit hole. Finally, a big thank you to my friend Paul McNamara. Paul, you may recall, was a previous guest on the Criminologist podcast. I was so delighted to find a special gift that Paul left for me at the conference. Paul, although in Australia, was unable to attend the conference, but he did leave me a copy of his memoir, The Criminal Class, Memoir of a Prison Teacher. Thank you so much for that, Paul, and for the heartwarming inscription on the inside of the book, which you did sign for me. To Joe, your wisdom and insight shines a light on some dark places. Thanks for having me on The Criminologist. Thanks so much, Paul, for that gift. Wish we could have connected in person, but we'll add it to our respective bucket list. And speaking of all the great individuals who I got to meet recently in Australia, thought I would drop in a brief moment of Zen for you all. Encounters happen constantly, but each occurs only once. It is only when we remember this in our hearts that we can truly embrace the connections that encounters make possible. Be grateful for each encounter. Be thankful when someone or something reveals itself to us. Treasuring each unique moment gives us the power to truly live that moment more meaningfully. So to each speaker, every delegate, and every listener who's been part of this journey, my gratitude is profound. You've expanded my worldview, enriched my knowledge, and added chapters to my story. And speaking of chapters, holy cow, what a segue, Joe. I want to remind you all that the latest edition of the Psychology of Criminal Conduct, the 7th edition, is now available. And I point this out in particular because Dr. Bonta and his team have done a good job of, once again, staying current with the knowledge. This time, they've included references to desistance from crime, the Good Lives model. So I encourage you all to check out the 7th edition of the Psychology of Criminal Conduct. And I am flattered to share with you that in consultation with me, Dr. Bonta has included some of my content within the text. Specifically, if you go to the end of the chapter, you will see online resources for students and academics. You can click on the student resource web link and it will bring you to the interview that I did with Shad Maruna talking about desistance from crime. There's also a nice YouTube clip in there that I created introducing individuals to the topic of desistance. So thank you, Dr. Bonta. Honored to be included in the 7th edition of the Psychology of Criminal Conduct, and encourage listeners to go out and get that text, and of course, check out my inclusion in this latest edition. Speaking of which, because I know I've talked to Dr. Bonta about this, I'm going to share with you all once again a fun little parody that we created here in the Criminologist podcast studios, referencing, of course, the risk, need, responsivity principle. Dr. Bonta said he really got a kick out of this, so without further ado, let's check out the fictitious product, Criminogard. Tired of those pesky risk factors? Fed up with those nagging periods of reoffending? Just can't seem to keep on the straight and narrow? Then try Criminogard. Criminogard is our patented repellent against criminogenic need. Criminogard is effective against the risk factors of delinquent past, dysfunctional family relationships, substance misuse, lack of pro-social leisure activities, deficits around education and employment, negative peers, pro-criminal attitude, and a history of antisocial personality pattern. Simply apply Criminogard at the onset of delinquent behavior or when actuarial risk assessment warrants application. Criminogard works by attacking criminogenic need at the source while buffering against future risk. Inspired by general personality and cognitive social learning theory, Criminogard identifies criminogenic need at its source. Then our top secret byproducts mimic prosocial modeling to elicit the onset of prosocial behavior. Once the cost for antisocial behavior outweighs the rewards, users begin seeing reductions in criminal deeds. Criminogard is available in regular, mint, or jasmine scent. Find Criminogard at all quality vendors, shops, and strip malls. Criminogard is not a substitute for proven evidence-based practices. Criminogard may cause mild discomfort or skin rash. In case of continued maladaptive behavior, users should subject themselves to proven core correctional practices. Criminogard has failed to result in significant effect sizes in recidivism reduction. Buyer beware, not sold in Canada. We will be back next week with a fresh episode. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our website, the Paragon Group, LLC.com, for training or presentations as to core correctional skills, information as to our TIDES program model, or, of course, the topic of desistance from crime. If you have questions or comments as to this podcast, feel free to contact the show via our email at thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to follow us through our Facebook and Instagram pages at The Criminologist Podcast. New fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. The Criminologist is also on X, formerly known as Twitter. Give us a follow at Crim Media Group. That's CRIM Media Group. You may also connect with me, Joseph Arvidsson, on LinkedIn, and follow both the Criminologist Podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Hey, lastly, if you've not already done so, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this podcast. And if you believe in what we're doing on the show, if you're part of the movement, please spread the word, tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the podcast, and of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
The Criminologist Podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can find more content and videos on our YouTube channel, The Criminologist. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Both the Criminologist Podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.